The subway station was alive with noise, the clatter of footsteps, the hiss of brakes, the hum of tired voices echoing off tiled walls. Commuters rushed past in blurry motion, each face fixed forward, each mind locked on its own small world. Nobody looked up. Nobody slowed down. In one corner, beneath a flickering light, sat a man with a violin. His coat was torn, his beard untrimmed, his shoes mismatched. The cold tiles beneath him leached warmth from his body, but he didn't seem to notice. His eyes were closed, his fingers trembling slightly as they held the bow. Then, with a slow breath, he began to play. The sound was fragile at first, like glass touched by wind. A few notes escaped the violin and drifted into the tunnel, hesitant, searching. Then came the melody, haunting, gentle, full of sorrow and beauty. It curled through the air like smoke, threading itself between the rush of footsteps and the growl of trains. But no one stopped. A businessman passed by, talking loudly into his phone. A woman with earbuds ignored the melody entirely. A teenager tossed a glance at the man, frowned, and kept walking. A few coins clinked in the open violin case, mostly pity, not appreciation. The man played anyway. He always did. His name was Elias Grant. Once, long ago, he had stood beneath golden lights on a grand stage, dressed in black and white, his violin glowing beneath the chandeliers of the New York Philharmonic Hall. He had been a prodigy, the Elias Grant, the violinist, whose music could make people cry, without knowing why, but fame is fragile. A single tragedy can undo a lifetime of applause. His wife, Anna, had been his anchor. They met in a rehearsal hall, she a pianist, he a rising star. They played together, lived together, dreamed together. But one winter night, on her way to his concert, Anna's car skidded on black ice. She never made it to the hall. Elias played that night anyway. He thought the music might keep her spirit near. But when the final note faded, so did the light in his life. He stopped performing, stopped composing, stopped living. The silence became unbearable. Eventually, the debts came. The house went. The orchestra replaced him, and the streets welcomed him with open arms. Now, years later, the subway was his concert hall. The world had forgotten him, but his violin hadn't. That afternoon, as the wind swept dust down the tunnel, Elias closed his eyes and let the music take him somewhere far away, to candlelight dinners, to quiet laughter, to Anna's voice humming beside the piano. He didn't hear the footsteps of the little girl until she was already standing in front of him. She couldn't have been more than 7. Her hair was tied into uneven pigtails, her backpack shaped like a cat. She stared at Elias with wide, curious eyes, not with pity, not with fear, just... No wonder the violin's song slowed to a whisper. Elias lowered his bow, embarrassed. The girl tilted her head. "Why did you stop?" she asked. Elias blinked, surprised. "Because..." He hesitated. "Because no one wants to listen." "I was listening," she said softly. Something inside him trembled. Her words, so simple, broke through the wall of indifference that had grown around his heart. He smiled weakly. "Would you like to hear another?" She nodded eagerly, sitting cross-legged right there on the cold floor. Elias lifted the violin again. This time, he played not for money, not for survival, but for her, for the one listener who truly heard. The music soared. The melody danced. It wasn't perfect. Some notes wavered. The strings were old. But it was alive. The little girl's eyes shone as if she were watching magic. When the song ended, she clapped, loud and unashamed. Then she reached into her tiny purse and pulled out a crumpled dollar bill. "It's all I have," she said, placing it carefully into his case. "I was going to buy ice cream, but you made me happy instead." Elias felt tears sting his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. "That means more than you know." Her mother called from a distance. "Lily, come on." The girl smiled, waved, and ran off into the crowd. Elias sat there, holding the dollar, as the train roared past. For the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. The next morning, the subway station was unusually crowded. People were pointing at something on their phones, whispering. A man approached Elias, breathless with excitement. "Hey, you're the violin guy. You're all over the internet." Elias frowned. "What?" The man turned his phone around. On the screen was a video. shaky, filmed from a distance. It showed Elias playing, eyes closed, lost in music, with the little girl sitting in front of him, smiling. The caption read, "A homeless man plays the violin in the subway. Watch what this little girl does. It'll melt your heart." The video had millions of views. Elias watched in stunned silence. Comments flooded the screen. "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Someone find this man. He deserves a stage. Humanity still exists. For the first time in years, people saw him. Within days, reporters came, photographers, curious passers-by. Someone even brought him a new violin donated by a music store. You're an inspiration," they said. Elias didn't know how to respond. He wasn't a hero, just a broken man who played to remember. But among all the attention, there was one message that stood out. It came from a man named Michael Adler, the director of the New York Symphony. "Mr. Grant, if this reaches you, we would be honored if you'd come and perform again. One last concert. Your music deserves to be heard." Elias stared at the message for a long time. His hands trembled. His heart pounded. Could he still play? Could he face that stage again? The same one where he had last seen Anna alive? He didn't know. But something inside whispered, "She'd want you to." The night of the concert arrived. The theater was packed, the air electric with anticipation. Cameras lined the aisles. The story of the homeless violinist had spread across the world. People who had never set foot in a concert hall came just to see him. Backstage, Elias stood before a mirror. He hardly recognized the man staring back, clean-shaven, wearing a crisp suit donated by the orchestra. Yet behind the polished exterior, his eyes still carried the ache of years lost. He lifted his violin, the same one he had played in the subway, and whispered, "For you, Anna." When he stepped onto the stage, the audience rose to their feet. The applause thundered through the hall. For a moment, Elias just stood there, overwhelmed. Then, as the lights dimmed, he closed his eyes and began to play. The first note was soft, a whisper that floated through the silence. Then another, and another. The music swelled, filling every corner of the hall. It was not a song of fame or triumph. It was a song of grief, love, and forgiveness. He poured everything he had into those strings, every lonely night, every empty day, every moment of loss. The audience sat transfixed, some with tears streaming down their cheeks. At the final note, the hall fell utterly silent. Then came the applause. A storm of sound. Endless, rising like a wave. Elias bowed once. And in that moment, he thought he saw her, Anna, standing at the edge of the stage, smiling. After the concert, offers poured in, interviews, tours, recordings, but Elias refused most of them. He didn't want fame anymore. He wanted meaning. He used the money from the concert to start a foundation, Music for Hope, providing instruments and lessons for underprivileged children. "Every child deserves a song," he said. Sometimes music is the only thing that listens, and once a week, no matter how busy he became, Elias returned to the subway. He played in the same corner, under the same flickering light, not for fame, not for money, but for remembrance. One evening, as he played a gentle melody, he heard a small voice behind him. "Hi, mister?" He turned. It was Lily, older now, maybe 10. She held a violin case in her hand. "My mom said you're famous now." She grinned. "I've been learning the violin too. Will you play with me?" Elias felt his throat tighten. "I'd be honored." She unpacked her tiny violin, tucked it under her chin, and waited for his nod. Together, they began to play, their bows moving in harmony, their notes weaving together like sunlight and shadow. Passers-by slowed, then stopped, drawn by the sound. When they finished, Lily looked up and said, "That was fun." "You think we'll go viral again?" Elias chuckled. "Maybe, but even if we don't, we made someone's day a little brighter." "That's enough," the little girl smiled, her eyes shining with the same kindness that had once changed his life. Then she whispered, "My teacher says music never dies. It just finds new ears." Elias nodded, his heart full. She's right. That night, after the crowds had gone, Elias sat alone in the quiet subway station. The air smelled faintly of rain. Somewhere in the distance, a train rumbled by. He took out his violin and played one last song before heading home, a soft lullaby Anna used to hum. As the melody faded, he looked up at the tiled ceiling, whispering, "Thank you for sending her to me." A single tear slipped down his cheek. It landed on the old violin, a silent testament to pain, love, and the strange beauty of second chances. Years later, a bronze statue stood in that same subway corner, a man with a violin, sitting cross-legged, smiling softly. The plaque beneath it read, Elias Grant, 1954 to 2021. He played so the world could remember how to feel. Every day, musicians came to that spot to play. Some were beginners, some were masters. And often among them, a young woman with bright eyes and a violin of her own would stop, smile, and play her favorite song. Her name was Lily Grant, adopted daughter of the man whose music had changed her world. Moral: sometimes the smallest act of kindness, a dollar, a smile, a moment of listening, can rewrite someone's entire life. Because behind every silence, there's a story waiting to be heard.